Okay, so what I would like for you guys to do, if you have time, of course, I can't enforce this, but I strongly encourage you to do, is to practice applying some of what we've just gone over in the longer video. So I'd like for you to use your notes, and of course, you get to use your notes throughout the entire semester when you're doing argument analysis. That's the cool thing. Use your notes to bracket and number this argument. So just have your notes, right next to that. Reread the notes. And what I would encourage you to do is stop there. Just bracket and number. Don't label yet. First, make sure you've got your bracketing and numbering. Reread this, and then and pause the video. Reread this, and then try bracketing and numbering only. When you're done, continue with the video, and let's see how well you did using the notes, right? In this example up here, to practice applying what you just learned. In doing so, we're going to be creating new brain cells and establishing neural pathways. It is through practice that we become competent and knowledgeable in something. All right, so I'm going to continue, assuming that you've chosen not to practice and apply for whatever reason, no judgment, but I'm just going to go ahead and go over the markup. Again, I'm not going to do it as a professor. I'm going to go into student mode. So I'm going to role model to you how you would do this. All right. So Dr. Carrillo wants me to analyze this argument. An argument is a set of statements where at least one, a premise or a reason, is given in support of a conclusion. So I know there's going to be, if she's saying that this is an argument, it's a simple argument, it has to have at least one conclusion. It has a conclusion and only one. And it has to have at least one statement that's a premise. Now I know that I have to bracket and number statements, so I'm going to start with that. So what did my notes say? Bracket and number each statement. The number should be at the top of the statement and the statement's very beginning, and that I should not bracket anything that is not a statement. Okay, so this says, I think we have a duty to be helpful. That is definitely a statement according to the definition that I got not only during week 2, but the more informed lesson I got about statements during the soft chalk while I was working through the soft chalk argument module. Now let's see what's next. Thus do I also think we have a duty to wear a mask, since wearing a mask helps people by making it less likely someone passes COVID-19 from one person to another. Okay, so I know this looks like a conclusion indicator. I'm guessing that if I follow what she said up here, I'm going to go ahead and follow her lead and not include the conclusion indicator in my bracketing. So I wouldn't start the bracket with do, because then I'd form a question, right? Do I want to do this? But I could start it with I. So statement 2. Okay. I also think we have a duty to wear a mask. That's the end of a statement. And then this same sentence I'm seeing now, this is interesting, this same sentence has 2 statements. The new statement is indicated by since, which I think is a premise indicator. I'll get back to that in a minute. But this is definitely another statement within the same sentence. Wearing a mask helps people by making it less likely someone passes. Okay, so yes, that's statement 3. Okay, so now do you agree? Okay. That's not a statement. What did my notes say? Do not bracket anything that is not a statement. As was stated in the argument module, this is a question. It is not a statement. And my notes tell me not to bracket anything that's not a statement, so I'm just going to leave it alone. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead. So if you tried this on your own, did you make any mistakes? One thing you could do is create a list where you could put argument, this is optional, argument analysis practice mistakes. And what you can do is you can put the argument number, you can describe the mistake, and then you can describe, you can write down what led to the mistake. And then what you can do is each time you do this for a grade or practice is you can review your mistakes to learn from them and keep them in mind so that you don't repeat them. But this is purely optional and totally up to you. Okay, so now an important note. Notice, okay, and I'm pretty sure I covered this during a previous lesson for argument construction. You can have any number of statements in a sentence, and I think that was also covered in a module. So let's go ahead and write this here, right? So here where it says bracket and number each statement, so we're going to do like a little exclamation mark, right? That means remember, warning. So this is a warning we're going to put on this very page. We're going to put a sentence can have more than one statement. If for some reason you do not have any room here, exactly here to write this, you can just put it at the bottom here. Put it in exclamation marks because I need to find it. All right. All right. Now, notice in this argument, what does this say? My reason for thinking this is true. So the second sentence in this argument did have two statements. And then the second sentence in this argument also has two statements. All right, so next what we're going to do is, what do our notes tell us to do? Label statements, use a C to indicate a conclusion in a simple argument, C repeated when conclusion is repeated, use P to indicate premises. These labels should be to the right of a statement number. Okay, so now what I encourage you to do is pause the video and practice using your notes and this as an example to reference. This is just an example to practice labeling these statements. This, of course, is drawing from all the knowledge as well from the argument module. Okay, so assuming you've done that or decided not to do that, I will continue. I think we have a duty to be helpful. I have no idea what that is. But then I see, thus do I also think we have a duty to wear a mask. Thus is typically a conclusion indicator. So I'm thinking that this is probably the conclusion. So guys, keep in mind, this is me not being a student, that you could always do a question mark when you're not sure and you haven't made a final determination when you're marking up. But once you're ready to submit an answer, you're going to get rid of that question mark. Okay? All right, so another note is the argument module had an extensive list of premise and conclusion indicators. If you do not have a copy of that list, you should go on Google and do a search for premise and conclusion indicators and get as many as you can. I challenge you to create a list of 25 to 30 premise indicators, a list of 25 to 30 conclusion indicators, and add this to your toolkit. Add this to your notes. Make it page 6 or page 7. Maybe put a note on here to look. You could write a note to yourself saying, don't forget to look at list of premise and conclusion indicators, okay? So use that. Don't just guess what this word might be. It might not be anything. It might be neither a premise nor a conclusion indicator, but you certainly want to use the premise indicators and conclusion indicators as mentioned, as taught in the argument module. Okay, so I think we have a duty to wear a mask, and then let me look at my list of indicators. Yes, my list of indicators is that since typically functions as a premise indicator. So I'm thinking this could also be a premise. I know there's only one conclusion because Dr. C said all these arguments have only one conclusion. There's what she calls simple arguments. And here, this is talking about a duty to wear a mask. This is talking about what a mask does. This sentence is saying that we do have a duty to be helpful, and it seems like a mask is helpful. So I think that this is being used as a premise in support of the conclusion as well. So, yeah. Now, as I'm rereading this and I'm looking at this as a whole, even without the indicator words, it does seem like this is something that the author is trying to convince the reader of. And then they do use a conclusion indicator. They do use a premise indicator. All right, so switching back into professor coaching mode, remember that since is not that the list of premise and conclusion indicators that you read about in an argument, those are typical. But you got to remember that means a lot of the time, most of the time, certain words function as premise or conclusion indicators. Not all the time. Since sometimes functions as a temporal indicator. Okay, so here's where we're gonna write down stuff that that students need to remember. Sometimes they make a mistake. Since is not always a premise indicator. sometimes it indicates time or sequence. Okay, that said, it is a premise indicator most of the time, at least often, more often than not, but not always. And so there's going to be indicators that, there's going to be words that functionally, there's going to be indicators or words or word phrases that typically function as a premise or conclusion indicator, but you still have to use your college level reading and comprehension skills to make a final determination on whether a given word like since is really functioning like that. This is true of many other, oh wait a minute, I don't want to say it, I don't want you to think that a lot of other words are temporal indicators that are often premise indicators, but let's write the bigger point. So, bigger point. Well, actually, let's wait on that. Okay, so, all right, so let's focus on this. So we've got a premise, a conclusion, and a premise. So we've done everything that we've learned to do here in terms of marking up and visually presenting our analysis. Let's say I want to do extra credit. I'm going to do the diagram. So what I encourage you to do now is to read these notes on your own for the argument diagram, and then try to do the diagram on your own, pause the video, and come back. All right, so let's go ahead and go over the answer. So the answer is, remember you have to label it what it is that you're presenting when it comes to diagrams and patterns. You can do this abbreviation, not AD, AD is too short. This would be okay. So you do S1, a premise, works together with S3, another premise, right? Okay, Dr. C, I use the plus sign to indicate working jointly together, then I have to underline, and then she said I have to put the downward arrow directly below the plus sign when it's just two premises working together, the arrow being given in support of, and of course that would be my conclusion. She said my notes say that the conclusion should come last. As my notes indicate, I give the statement number and then the label in the parentheses. So, okay, switching back into coach mode. Here you have S1 plus S3 are working jointly together in support of S2, a conclusion. Some students, for some reason, decide or make up or imagine that you can't have 3 up here and 2 down here. Like you have to have, the numbers have to go sequentially. But that's not what the diagram represents. Remember, that's the pattern. The pattern tells you the order of the statements. This tells you what the actual logical structure are. Statement 1 is a premise that works with statement 3, a premise, in support of statement 2, a conclusion. Okay, so, and notice in this diagram, we don't even have a statement number. So if you want to write this down as a warning where you have the argument diagrams, you could do a warning that you could write not all statement numbers will go into a diagram if a statement is repeated. You could write that down as a warning. Just pause the video. Okay. You could also write down as another warning here within the diagrams notes that the numbers do not have to occur in order from top to bottom. Okay, so now I encourage you to read the notes for argument patterns by yourself and then try to do the argument pattern on your own. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, assuming that you've tried this or decided not to try it. You can do that abbreviation. AP would be too short. I didn't really need to underline that. Because remember, argument patterns, so you should have read your notes, so I'm not going to repeat what is in the notes. I'm going to switch into student mode. Okay, so according to my notes, I'm not going to have any numbers in my pattern. My notes tell me to use labels only and not to use the arrow. She said to just use the dash. So I'm going to do P dash C dash P. Okay, so as you can see, this is another example from the argument module lesson. We've got P, C, P. All right, so remember, now up here I said, look, you can't have 2 P's and then a C. That only applies when the premises are consecutive. If you have a conclusion between 2 distinct premises in the argument, then you will have 2 P's. But if the premises occur consecutively within the argument, you will have only 1 P, either before the C or after the C. So here we should say there should be only one P when an argument has consecutive premises. Okay. So this is still correct because these premises aren't consecutive. We don't get the second premise immediately after the first premise. It's interrupted, if you will, by a conclusion. All right, so let's go ahead and work on, I could end this video here, making this video definitely about 16 minutes less than the first longer video, but I say let's go ahead and practice another one, and then we'll end this video still about 8 minutes, in 8 minutes less time than the original one. So argument 3, so you think about how I coached you to pause and do certain things in certain phases. That's what we're going to do here, all right? So I encourage you to use your notes, these examples, and any mistakes you've made to do better on or to continue practicing your ability to bracket and number the statements. Okay, so let's go ahead to bracket and number. Because masks do nothing to slow the spread of COVID-19, I do not think I have a duty to wear a mask. Do your research, amigo. Whoa, that's an argument? Okay, I'm in student mode, by the way. So because I know because that seems like it might be telling me something as a premise or conclusion, so let me go look at my indicators. Ah, yes, because typically functions as a premise indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and, following Dr. C's lead, I'm not going to bracket that indicator. So this is going to be 1. Oh, by the way, guys, this is Dr. C. You might want to put a warning in your notes for bracketing and numbering. Do not include any S's. Okay, so I don't want to see S1 here, just the 1 inside the circle. So no S's in your markup. Again, if you want to, you can add that to page 1 of your notes. You could do like an arrow and put, there should be no S's, right, in your notes. So again, this is optional. Some students do that. They do weird stuff sometimes. Okay, so masks do nothing to slow the spread of COVID-19. That's a complete thought. That's a statement per the definition in the argument module. I do not think I have a duty to wear a mask. That's the second statement. So this is another example where you have 2 statements in a sentence. And in fact, this is an example where one sentence comprises the entire argument. It's possible to have an argument given in one single sentence. Okay. All right. So now, do your research, amigo. Is that making a claim about reality? Is it describing the world or someone or something in some way such that it could be categorized as true or false? Well, what if amigo said true or false in response to this right here? That wouldn't make any sense. Do your research, amigo. False. No. So this is not practically or in theory classifiable, this expression, as true or false. It's not a statement per the statement lesson in the argument module. So what did our notes tell me? What did my notes tell me? Don't bracket and number anything that's not a statement. And in fact, I remember that this is called a command. Okay, so now back in coach mode. How did you do? What mistakes did you make? Learn from them, grow from them. Now practice labeling the statements and return to this video when you've done that. Okay, so according to my list of indicators, this typically functions as a premise indicator. And it does seem like they're trying to argue that they don't have a duty to do something. So I'm going to go ahead and, using my indicator knowledge and my reading comprehension skills and the definition of argument, to mark this as a premise and to mark this as a conclusion. And of course, this doesn't get marked as anything because it's not a statement. And we're labeling only statements as premise or conclusion. Okay, so now, at this point, guys, I'm not going to tell you to stop a video. I'm just going to let you know what I'm going to do next. And then it's up to you to decide that you will stop the video and practice applying or making use of the notes and the examples to practice applying and check your answer with the video. So I'm just going to assume you're doing that from now on. This will shorten the videos. All right, so argument diagram. Okay. So I have to start with the premises, and I have to start by indicating the statement and its number. So S1 is a premise. that is given in support of another statement, the only other statement, the conclusion. Wow, that's a really simple diagram. It has only one statement as a premise. So at least one premise, one statement, a premise is given in support of another statement, a conclusion. That was easy. Argument pattern. This one's really easy too. We have a premise. Don't use the arrow. She said use a dash. It's followed by a conclusion. Cool. I did not know that a diagram might have only one premise offered. Okay, so guys, if you somehow in your mind thought that you had to have at least two premises in a diagram, you might want to write that as a warning in your pattern. You can, if you want to add this, say that not here, but down here, you can squeeze it in. If you've run out of room, you could just do an arrow like that, and then you could add, more notes on argument patterns. And then you could add back here, you could say a diagram might have just one premise. Because the diagram represents what's actually going on in the argument. If the argument in paragraph form has only one premise, your diagram will have only one premise. Okay, that's the diagram. All right, so that ends this video. We have about I think 5 more arguments to work through, and you'll see that we start to go along at a really good pace.